Hello, everybody. I'm Marco Zarattini. I'm an FNRS postdoc working at the CPBL laboratories. Today, I'm glad to chair the BrIAS Forum entitled Fantastic Food, Hemp, Big Opportunity from an Ancient Weed. This BrIAS session will bring together a presentation both from an academic and industrial point of view about the possibilities coming from a somehow discriminated ancient crop, such as hemp. Just to give you a brief introduction, hemp, called also cannabis sativa, has been a species of value to humans for much of our history, given its broad its broad adaptation to different environments and multiple uses. On the other hand, concern over psychotropics form of hemp, for example, marijuana, led to a prohibition during much of the 20th centuries. Opportunities from hemp have increased with the recognition that the crop offers a growing and diverse uses for not only its fibers, but also for its seed grains, essential oil, and food production as well. In this roundtable, we will discuss more in detail the biology of hemp. Then we will discuss about the possibility uses of hemp as an at the industrial level for food production and biomass production. And finally, we will appreciate a real on-the-field story about CBD oil production in Belgium. So the forum of today will see the participation of 4 experts. The first one, who is connected on Teams, is Professor Stefano Amaducci. Stefano Amaducci is a full professor at the Faculty of Agriculture and Food and Environmental Sciences at the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Italy. He published more than 70 articles in peer-reviewed journals. And since 2018, he's editor of the Journal of Industrial Crop and Products. Moreover, recently he coordinated the European project Multi-Hemp, involving 23 partners located in 10 different countries among Europe and China. This project aimed to create new genotypes on hemp by using molecular biology and genetics technique on one end, and to develop new biorefinery programs to use hemp as a source of energy. I don't know if Prof is Stefano Amaducci is connected.
Yes, I am.
Okay, Stefano, let you the floor.
Okay. I share my screen. Could you please confirm that?
Just a second. Yes. Oh, no. Just a second.
I'm here.
Voila. Yes, it works.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marco, for the invitation. And I will, as you can see, the title of my presentation is Hemp, an Ideal Crop for the Bio-Based Economy. And I put a question mark because I think that, well, on one thing I don't necessarily agree with your introduction is the fact that you consider hemp a crop that has been somehow discriminated. I don't believe it has been discriminated, maybe has been neglected. But I think that there is always an option for something that works, and I think that my speech will be about bringing evidence that actually hemp has a great opportunity in the frame of the bio-based economy. Briefly, I go through my personal hemp bio, because actually I've been working on hemp for quite some time. As you can see, I started in Bologna my PhD. And actually, even when I was a student, I worked a little bit on hemp. So first time I saw a hemp field was in '95, but I did my PhD from 96 and 98 in Bologna on one of the first European project on hemp, which was called Hemp for Europe, manufacturing and production systems, that really dealt with, say, whole production chain of hemp. And I think this is something interesting. Most of the projects in which I've been involved, they really saw the whole production chain. So from the planting of the crop until the production of end products. Then there was this second project in which I was not directly involved, Harmonia, but it's an interesting project because it's in this context that one of the first yellow varieties was developed that had improved, let's say, characteristics, especially linked to the production and the extraction, especially of the fiber. Then I spent a couple of years in Wageningen, again working on multi-purpose industrial crops. Among these there was hemp, and I came back to Italy, but there I became researcher in Piacenza from 2001, and quite soon I wrote this project, HempSys, that got granted, was in the frame of the fourth framework of European Commission, or fifth, I don't remember anymore. But that was interesting because it was all focused on the idea of having hemp for textile again, with a particular innovation. And also there the industry was involved, and we did some textile. It was a quite interesting project. And then, as you said, I became a coordinator of multi-hemp in 2012. I was, as you can see, there is a small break in which I didn't work on hemp very much. And this is because if you work on hemp all the time, maybe you don't become professor of field crops. You also have to know about other crops. So I did, and in fact, you see, I became professor in 2014. And at the moment, I became full professor, and I think I owe much of my career to hemp. I have to recognize that. And I'm still involved in 3 projects at the moment, 2 European projects that are at the end, Grace and Sushi, and Multi-Canapa, which is a local project. I think it's interesting, Grace and both Sushi, because they are kind of a project that for their topic, they help us understand where hemp is going, but in general, the bio-based economy. So bio-based economy, Grace, for example, is a project that answered a call from the Commission, in particular for the BBI, in which they asked for bio-based material coming from crops grown on marginal land. So the production of bio-based, let's say, crops should be in marginal land, not in land where we grow food. So there should be no competition in between non-food, especially bioenergy, but in general non-food, and food crops. While Sushi, it's much more specific. It's based on hemp fiber as well, but the objective is to have a multifunctional biocomposite in a certain way to find high added value application for the hemp fiber. So the search for high added value application is also an important concept to note. Why do I think that, or how can we evaluate if hemp is an ideal crop for the bio-based economy, and therefore it can take advantage of this historical moment in which there is, I think, a lot of push toward a new form of economy in which we base much more our resources on bio-based material. One of the key elements, I think, of the bio-based economy is the biorefinery, and I think in this hemp is for sure a winning crop, or at least I think that hemp represent an exemplary crop for the bio-based economy, also to maybe make the general public understand what is the bio-based economy and what is a biorefinery. And why this? Because hemp is naturally a biorefinery. Everybody knows, we all know, if we are here listening to this webinar, is because I think we all have a basic knowledge of hemp, and we know that hemp can be grown for the fiber. It can be grown also for like a kind of a byproduct of fiber extraction, which is this woody core, so the sheaths. Then we have the seeds, of course, which are of very good quality for food applications. And then we also have the flower, so what is left after flowering and after seed production, which is a very rich wealth, I would say, of secondary metabolites, among which there is cannabinoids. So there is a very big diversity of products. But even if we look at the way that hemp is processed, again, the biorefinery concept is there. This is a design which represents the biorefinery concept that we had, we designed and we developed in the framework of the multi-hemp project. So in the top you have like, okay, as Marco said, we develop new varieties and we advance the agrotechnic, but at the top part we define, as we just said, so there is the crop, and the crop has different products. So at harvest already you separate the stems from the seeds, and then during the process of threshing the seeds you obtain a threshing residue, which was one of the first time it was addressed, this idea of recovering the threshing residues, so the bits that you lose during the separation of the seeds from the rest of the inflorescence. You get these small leaves in which you can still find quite an interesting content of cannabinoids, and then you can extract cannabinoids or essential oils. Okay, but this is happening in the field. What happens later is you bring the stems, and here you see that you have two lines, the longitudinal hemp line, which is at your right, which is like the traditional way of handling the stems and the fiber, which they have to be kept parallel, and then you obtain long fibers in a processing path that is very similar to the one of linen, of flax fiber. Or what is used, I think, in 99% of the cases in hemp cultivation in Europe, is the disordered line, in which the stems are just, left on the field after harvesting, and then they are left there to rot a bit, and then they are baled and brought to the industry, where again it's a biorefinery, because you have the separation of the hemp stems in different fractions, which is exactly what happens in a biorefinery. You have a raw material and you obtain different fractions, and the fractions are of course the different grades of fiber and the sheaves, but also the dust, which sometimes is often 10-15% of the entry biomass. So of course you have something to recover from that or take advantage of that as well. So if we consider hemp a model for the bioeconomy, is because we exploit and valorize the whole plant in a complete value chain. Then is also, I think is also very interesting, because it produces food, as we said, and I think this is good, because hemp cannot be, let's say, attacked by this problem of the food versus fuel or biomass debate. Then is a low input, high resource use efficiency, and we did a lot of publication on this. I'm an agronomist, so I've worked a lot about fertilization, irrigation of hemp, and in many publications we proved that indeed hemp uses resources in a very efficient way. Then has also additional benefits for the environment, can be grown on marginal and polluted land, which was part of the GRACE project. And then, what is very important, it produces innovative, recyclable, sustainable materials that have a market, as we saw in the second slide. This poster that was produced in both the fiber and multi-hemp project, in which it was indicated the different application of the different part, but the actual application. So all these parts already have a actual destination in the market. But I think the market is also an important thing to consider, because very often hemp has been considered very easy to market, because it has a kind of appealing look. It's a cool crop, everybody knows about it. There is this double, or not a double sense, but in a certain way there is this contradictory image of hemp as a forbidden crop on a way, and all these nice and positive features on the others. But we did in Hempsys a study on the marketing of hemp, and we also developed some products like this ticket that was produced by GT Design, who was a partner, a designer partner in the project, and they developed the concept of blue hemp. And it was quite clear from this market study that the image of hemp as a forbidden crop should not be necessarily linked, or better not to be linked to the image of high quality products that you could actually get from the crop. So they said no use, of the leaf to indicate the products, which is associated with marijuana, but instead, create this blue, which comes from the noble, origin and history of the crop, and green for the positive environmental benefit. So there is also scope in marketing the crop. One interesting thing I would like to say about hemp and about what actually is missing, what are the knowledge gaps or the bottlenecks that hamper, let's say, the explosion of hemp as a crop that we will finally see again in our countries at the same level as it used to be in the past. And this is the outcome of a multi-hemp stakeholder meeting that I had in the far now 2016 at the annual HEIA meeting. And there were, of course, all the stakeholders of the production chain, and I asked two questions. So what are the main technical constraints of the hemp value chains, and what is needed to increase hemp cultivation in Europe to 100,000 hectares? And everybody, and let's say most of the industry represented was the fiber industry. So the first constraint was enlarge the market of hemp products. So I think this is one of the key points which I understood, and I don't know if things have changed in the last years. But the fact is that everybody seems to want hemp products. But in the end, when you have hemp products, it's not necessarily so easy to sell, especially raw materials. So the hemp fiber processors that are few in Europe, they always had some kind of problem anyway to commercialize the fiber or the sheaves. So it's not so easy and to sell, and especially in large amount. So the best way is to enlarge the market, to create new products. That is for sure what the industry said at the time. Then there are some other issues like the quality of the fiber, which is very much weather dependent. It depends on the decorticability of the cultivar, on the fiber content to increase the yield. The dew retting, it's a very relevant issue. So how long you should keep your fiber in the field for the fiber to ret, and then to improve the quality of final fiber. This is more scientific and a technical bottleneck. Then a grading system to be able to mix different qualities, but also to communicate the quality of the fiber to the end user. And you see most of these aspects are linked to the fiber. Then mechanization of harvest. Other aspects like long-term cultivation sustained by contracts, because in many cases, the farmer might be interested 1 year, but not the next. An industry needs, of course, a reliable, number of farmers that grow the crop, and then new varieties, and that was one of the tasks and the purpose of GRACE. So let's see some data, or a little collection of data that we had during the project, or some let's say snapshot of some publication that we had in time, but with the main, let's say, thread of is hemp a multi-purpose, a dual purpose, or just a seed crop? I see that the main focus of this webinar is more linked to the fantastic food, so to the food application for hemp. But and this also maybe just because I wrote the multi-hemp project, I think and I hope that the future of hemp, it will be a future as a multi-purpose crop. So we did a lot of trials, and one thing that we saw is that the longer is the period between sowing and flowering, the longer is the biomass production. So of course the plant grows more in height, it has a thicker diameter, and it produces more stem yield. But of course the longer is the vegetative phase, because of course in Europe we have a defined amount of time in which the plant can stay on the field, the shorter is the time for seed production. So there is a trade-off, or you produce a lot of seeds, or you produce a lot of stems, or you find what is the optimal situation. And for this, of course, you have to select the varieties according to their phenology, so to when they flower. And for this, in the past, we did models that predict quite well when a specific variety in a specific environment should flower, and then you can predict how much it can be, the yield of stems and the yield of seeds. And this is relevant because if you see the top left, which is all the data of a common French variety, the Felina, grown in Cadriano, and you see the different emergence day, and you have a different times from emergence to flowering according to the emergence day. But you see in Wageningen is a completely different case. So the earlier you plant, the longer it stays in the field, because more or less flower at the same time. And this is because, of course, this is a variety which is more adapted to northern environment, and then in the southern environment, when you plant it early in the season, tends to pre-flower. So it's better to plant a little bit later. But this, of course, is not optimal, because if you plant later, you use less time, and especially hemp is a spring crop, so it's nice to grow it in early spring and not to wait March, for example, for having optimal photoperiodic condition. This is the importance of photoperiod. You see the same Finola variety, which is a variety which grows very well in the north, grown in Latvia and in Italy. So you see in Italy, this is my hand on the right, and that's a male flower. So the plant was was like 20-30 centimeters. And most of the plants stop their growth there because they stop their cycle. And this is because it's a shorter day plant, so it tends to flower when the days are short. And Finola, which is adapted to the north, can flower in the very long days of Latvia or north of or Canada, for example, where it's still one of the most common varieties. But the days are much longer. And in Italy, they're shorter during the vegetative growth, and then they tend to pre-flower. So it's very important to choose. But this is also a strategy, to choose varieties that they stay short, because we are not interested in the stems, and we just harvest the seeds. But the production of seeds is, and this is since the focus of the webinar is also seed production. A few words about that. We don't know much about hemp seed production. First of all, we have to remember that hemp, it's mainly, and it's always been historically, a fiber crop. Okay, when it was diffused in the 19th, 18th, 16th century in Europe and throughout the world, was mainly a fiber crop. It's true, it's always been used also for the seeds, but mainly the seeds were produced, to plant the crop next year. So it was exceptionally used as food, while most of the time, 99% of the time, a hemp crop was for fiber. So there is not much knowledge about seed production. And also to study seed production is quite a difficult task, because there is a high variability, and then it's very easy to make mistakes in yield assessment. The homogeneity of seed maturity is not very strong. Then you have cross-pollination, which limit the possibility to study seed quality. So you can study a crop, a variety by variety, but if you mix different variety, they cross-pollinate, so that you change also the quality of the oil and the seeds. And then you have bird predation. This is to see, and when you work on small plot, also bird predation can be a big problem, especially the first, that start to produce seeds when there is nothing around. Especially birds love hemp seeds. They come and get you seeds on the plant, and of course it's difficult to assess, so you have to protect. It's very expensive with netting. So this is just like a hemp plant at maturity, and you see that there are some seeds on the left. They come from the same inflorescence. You see, you have a. So if you wait for the last on the right to be ripened, you will lose the one on the left, which were already ripened at the moment of this harvest. So you have to, you know, trade off again for when is the best moment, but you're going to lose a lot of yield. So regarding the choice of the proper variety, here's just like a recent publication we made with an assessment on the oil content. And this is completely in line with other, well, actually another publication was done in the past with a larger collection. So you can, make, especially if you want to make, to produce the seed to extract the oil, then you see you have like differences, but most of the varieties are just in the range of 32, 34, so there is not a great difference. And I think going back to the multi-use application of hemp, it could be at least a combination of seed with cannabinoids. So here we have the concentration of the THC in a range of commercial varieties, and this is not because we want to produce THC, of course, but we want to make sure that the concentration of THC does not exceed the limit. And you see only these two Hungarian variety had a problem, all the rest were far below the limit. But what is interesting is CBD concentration. And you see, it's not a very high concentration, apart from the ancient, I would say, traditional dioecious Italian variety like CS, Fibraniola and Carbagnola that can exceed 2% of cannabinoid, but all the rest of the variety have still an amount of cannabinoids that, if you consider these in terms of kilos of CBD, this is just like from a random experiment we collected the threshing residue, okay, after harvest of the seeds, and then we still got an amount of biomass that multiplied by the content of CBD arrived to, even with Futura, for example, in one case, over 50 kilos per hectare. So this is something that is kind of interesting. Maybe you would not grow hemp just for CBD if you had to count on such a yield, and for sure you would not grow hemp if CBD maybe, or you would, let's say, sell directly the inflorescence, okay, but for CBD extraction, it could be a low value biomass that could still provide some income to the farmer that grows multipurpose hemp. Few words about fiber. I'm not saying much because I do not have much time left, and also because there is very much to say about fiber. Just few key points about the three main aspects that I think are still to be developed and can represent somehow a bottleneck. The first is the harvesting, not really the harvesting, because here you can see one of the double headers that have been developed in the last many years already for the harvesting of both, you know, the seeds and the stems, and actually these machines in particular are also the possibility to recover threshing residue. So this is a perfect machine for multipurpose hemp. But now also, since last year, I think there are few prototypes and quite advanced that can harvest hemp and lay in ordinate swath, as we see here in the center picture, that can then be baled and scratched in the traditional long fiber flax scratching line. So I mean, we always did some experiments also this year, and it can work quite well. So giving the possibility to have hemp for textile. There is still the part field ratting, which I think depends very much on the environmental conditions. So there is some work that has been done on this side, and we also are working on a model. And a model that predicts how long it takes according to a set of environmental conditions for the hemp fiber to be ready, for the stems to be ready to be collected and sent for scratching, because this is a very important aspect. And then, of course, there is the processing. I'm not saying anything about that, but of course, there are a lot of solutions for this. One last slide is about the choice again of varieties. We've been working a lot on yellow varieties, and this is in particular the Fibro 79, and we did a set of trials because it's a curious variety. You see, it's really yellow, and already hemp is a crop that uses nitrogen very, very well. So you would expect that a yellow variety has really some problems, but instead here we compared Futura and Fibro, which are very similar as a cycle and also as a crop, and it works quite well. It has but again, it's perfect for producing fiber because it decorticates better. It takes less time in the field for retting, and the quality of the fiber, as we see in this publication, but also in other work that we've performed, has improved. But it has a problem with the seed yield because, of course, there's a deficiency of nitrogen, and these reverberate, of course, in seed production. So again, a lot of trade-offs if you want to go, you know, for dual purpose, multi-purpose, or just for one single application. So just conclusion or key points. I think it's important to develop innovative products. I really think, and I mean, I've worked so much on hemp, and hemp gave me so much that I would really like to see a few thousand hectares of hemp at least in the Po Valley, just outside here of my window. And I believe this is possible only if we find innovative application for the fiber. Because and where it works, I think it works on a size which is about 1,000 hectares. So I think to duplicate what we have already in Europe, or really to create a new product, and around this new product develop the production chain, to which you can attach also textile, maybe at a smaller scale, but it's important to have a backbone. Then marketing is important, maybe backed up by LCA, which works always quite well with hemp. Breeding, of course, is just to have the right selection of varieties for each environment. Each environment has to have its own varieties, okay? And these then have to be bred for specific end-use application. Mechanization, I already said. Also, okay, this is an agronomy, so I have to put something about agronomy. What I think is relevant is maybe business model. So I just said, and I think the size at which hemp works quite well is around 1,000 hectares. So 1,000 hectares of hemp to feed a processing plant. But what about maybe small scale and developing small processing plant that can handle a small amount of hemp, especially for specific application? That is also something which I think it would be worth investigating if of course somebody would like to invest in this direction. With this, I concluded, I think, in time my presentation.
Many thanks, Prof. Amaducci, for this nice and interesting introduction. I don't know if Professor Amaducci can stay with us till the end of the discussion.
I am afraid not till the end. So if there are questions, I can be here for another 40 minutes, but not really until the end. As I said, at 3:30 I have another meeting, and so.
Okay, we can think about some question. If there are some question in the room. We can.
David has already some questions.
Or from Tim, obviously, yes.
I can read the. I can see myself. Is it economically worth to extract CBD from hemp, although it's a byproduct and not primary product? I mean, on this I can see something brief, and we started this idea in multi-hemp, and then in Grace we had one of the production chain that we targeted in Grace, in which there is Indena, which is a pharmaceutical Italian pharmaceutical company that pursued this purpose, and with them we did a lot of evaluations, and they developed all, let's say, the process, okay, to extract CBD at pharmaceutical grade, so 99% CBD, and actually they really supported this strategy. Of course, it depends very much on the price. So it has to be a cheap biomass, okay? And they found it economically convenient, instead of having dedicated crops for CBD in which just CBD is produced and the price is very high, just to recover instead the CBD from a waste product. It fit better in their economical vision perspective. I think the things have been a little bit stopped here in Italy because of the difficulty with the legal aspect of harvesting and commercializing even the threshing residues, but they found that it was economically viable, especially in a long-term perspective of seeing CBD produced as a cheap commodity. So for a very high price, of course, but they said for a very high price, there is the risk also that you get synthetic CBD on the market. But for a cheap price of CBD, then it could have been an option to have it from a cheap biomass.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your reply.
There is a question on pests. Hemp has its pests. Well, I would like to say that since the focus is very much on seeds, I mean, hemp doesn't really have big problems normally, but it is not pest-free, okay? And also we don't have much to do because there are no phytochemical products which are registered on hemp, so we have to take care of it agronomically, okay? Well, actually, I think since the focus is on seeds, in Italy we have quite difficulties, I find, or maybe it's just my problem and the people I know, to have a good yield of seeds. And on one side, it could be that the varieties are not adapted to the environment, and the ancient varieties anyway are fiber crops, so they are not supposed to produce high amount of seeds. On the other, I find that especially there should be some kind of tolerance integrated to heat or to water stress, which might be one of the causes that reduces the seed yield in Italy, but also might be also insects. And during seed maturation, there are a lot of stink bugs. And really a lot of them. Now is also like a problem for many other crops, but hemp in particular gets a lot of them, and I never tried, you know, to do a trial. So you kill the stink bug on one side and not on the other. Also because during flowering there is a lot of bees, so you don't want to kill the bees as well. So I never did a trial. I'm not nor an entomologist nor a pathologist, so I never really did a trial. But is not pathogen free. It's not pathogen free.
Let me thank for this nice reply.
That's not one question.
There is a question from
You got time? You got time? I think so.
Can we do another question? A couple of?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
So thanks for talking about hemp. In the United States, the limiting factor is farmers being able to get seed. I think there's a limited supply and they sell for $2 to $3. And then part of that's intellectual property. $2 to $3 per seed, it's really hard to afford to plant hectares of hemp. Are you having the same problem here in Europe?
Can you repeat the sentence, because Marco, I had some, so I understood in the United States there is a sale of, I didn't get the price.
The price of the seeds is quite high, $2 or
Which
$3.
was?
$2 or $3 per seed.
Per seed.
Per seed?
Yeah. And Seth was wondering if we have the same prices or the same problem here in Europe.
No. That is like marijuana seeds, I guess. I don't think it's. No. Here it's much cheaper. Still, is a quite expensive seed, but let's say how much is now? I don't remember, but I've not been buying for some time, so I don't want to say something stupid, but I think it's about I don't remember, 4 euros. 5 euros per kilo.
It's quite good. I think.
We have found a new business.
The what?
We have found a new business now.
Well, it's the intellectual property. That's the other thing. There's only like 2 companies that are legally able to sell, I think, in the United States. I mean, it's very few, so they can ask whatever they want.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's. I have a publication also with some colleagues in the United States, and they put my name in the publication because I contributed somehow also to the discussions, but mainly because I sent seeds. So I sent many seeds for the variety trial, and it was an adventure. It was an adventure because there are very strict import rules, but I think now I know that there are some importers that take advantage of the situation, they charge on a ridiculous amount of money, but I think that hemp now also commercialized directly in the United States. Of course, you cannot be like a lone farmer that decides to buy a few kilos of seeds. They sell to you only if you have like a large amount, because it's not like a sale just from the industry to the farmer. Usually they sell it to cooperative or to organization that can then distribute the seeds. But I think that they manage it directly, so the price should be much more reasonable,
Okay, thank you. Some other questions? Yes, there is a Jorge. Is there a question?
I have a question. There are breeding programs to create new varieties.
There are
breeding programs.
There are green programs.
Yeah, breeding programs to create new varieties.
Breeding.
Yeah.
Yes, breeding programs.
Breeding programs. I think. I mean, there is just one breeding company. Let's say 2 breeding companies, but what I would say mainly the French Hemp that breeds for hemp, and they breed for hemp for all Europe. But as I said, it's difficult to breed in France what is needed in Italy, because we need longer flowering, and they will not be able to produce the seeds that we need in France. So there has to be a collaboration. Then also the yellow variety that I mentioned before, not the fibre, which is French, but they come from the Netherlands. But I don't know how much they went on with the commercialization and breeding programs there, but traditionally it's the French. Then some breeding was done also in the Netherlands, in Wageningen, but more from an academic point of view. Then I don't know if there have been other breeding programs besides maybe small projects.
Thank you. Next question.
Are you considering also the introduction into the food system? There are several papers on this topic, so I guess if you are considering just new use.
I always worked, because I mean I really hemp is a fiber crop. It's always been a fiber crop. And most of the research is on the fiber. And I think that actually we see that there is an explosion of hemp cultivation throughout Europe in the last 6-7 years, something like this. And this is mainly for the seeds. You see in the statistics, and I think the next speakers from EIA will show you this, that the fiber market is more or less stable. Then there is this big increase, which is mainly due to the seeds. So I think seeds are responsible for a great expansion of hemp in the last years. So it's considered. And me personally, I'm a researcher. I'm happy to work more on seeds, even though it's, as I said, is a complex, very complex business. It's very difficult to fight the birds and to take into account the fact that a lot of seeds fall down. So there is a lot of work to be done genetically. It's like, you know, the work that has been done 10,000 years ago on wheat, to have a spike which is firm, it doesn't fall, and all the grains fall on the floor, has to be done on hemp. But so far, I don't know if anybody has started with this specific program. I think the French, for sure, they will have in the pipeline these activities, but it takes a long time and resources.
Many thanks for the reply. We have another question from the audience.
So I don't know if I missed it, but is there any evidence that the soil where hemp is grown can influence the content of final secondary metabolites?
Sorry, I got the end, not the beginning. If there is any evidence that the soil where hemp is grown can influence the content and or the profile of secondary metabolites or the active compounds? Well, there is few work, very few work on this. I'm sure there is, because the grey literature that now is becoming even more wide on the effect of cultivation environment on the presence of cannabinoids, mainly studied in greenhouse. Okay, it's there. So if there is in the greenhouse that you can control this, the CBD or THC level with lamps and with nutrients and with biostimulants, it means that it can be triggered in some way. So for sure, also in the natural environment, this can be affected. Actually, I have a publication that I have to finally submit at a certain point, in which we have different years and different genotypes and different environments, and we make a kind of a multivariate analysis to see which are the factors that affect the most, and there is of course some environmental effect, but there is not a complete and clear model on that.
Thank you. Some other question from our team. Would it be possible to have the register a video of the event? I think so. Yes. And I also have a curiosity, because I've noticed that the photo period has a big impact on the development of hemp. And I was wondering, is it possible to play with the photo period based on the aim that for which the hemp is grown?
Well, there are two ways to play with the photoperiod. One is to choose a variety which has a specific sensitivity to photoperiod. So you have late or early varieties according to the critical photoperiod. So the photoperiod at which they are triggered and they start to flower. So you have to choose the right variety for the right environment. Otherwise, you cannot play with of course, the day length directly, unless you're working, of course, in a controlled environment. And so you, of course, you can manipulate the light as you wish, as the growers do. But in real outdoor, the only thing you can do is to select the environment, of course, but within the same environment, you can play with sowing time. So that I said before, you remember the graph with with Felina. So if you sow Felina early, but not too early, I mean, when it should be planted in the end of March, then it's become, let's say, you exit the juvenile phase when it's still short days, and then it flowers early. So you should plant late. So that is the only way you can play with photoperiod, but it's kind of a, there is quite a lot of knowledge about that. It is also possible to predict, because we have models to predict how a plant behaves in a specific photoperiodic environment.
Thank you very much. I think it's enough for Prof. Amaducci. We would like to thank you again for this, to have decided to stay with us today. And now we are going to move on.
I thank you, and I thank everybody. Thanks for the question. Bye-bye.
Very much. Bye-bye. The next presentation is a joint presentation by Lorenza Romanese and Francesco Merizzi. Lorenza Romanese is the Managing Director of EIA, European Industrial Hemp Association. She has more than 12 years of experience in EU affairs and has been leading EIA efforts in Brussels since 2019. Lorenza previously advised interest in the oil and gas sector and managed the European Association of Independent Vine Growers. Francesco is a senior policy advisor of EIA, who is responsible for agriculture, environment, and industrial policies. He has previously worked in global and EU affairs for French multinational companies, and was responsible for wine, spirits, olives, and fiber sector at the European Farmers Organization Coppa Cosina. The floor is yours.
And the presentation.
The presentation is here. Should be here. Fantastic banner. Yes. Should go. Dovremmo aprirlo da qua. Can you see it from Timo? Does it work? Okay, please.
We can use the microphone here. Everybody can hear us?
We can use this one? Okay.
Awesome.
Can you hear me? Cool. Good afternoon. And my name is Lorenza, and I would like to thank you for first inviting us here to discuss with you about hemp and all the challenges around hemp, and for your attention. And I welcome any question and a good exchange at the end of the presentation. So first of all, I would like to say a couple of words of who we are and what we do. EIA stands for the European Industrial Hemp Association. We are a trade body. We represent the interest of three main actors: the one that farm hemp, the processing companies, and the traders. We count today more than 300 members, and we cover 26 over 27 member states, right? We are missing?
No, but we also have UK and non-European countries.
Yeah, but we're missing Latvia, no, right?
We're missing Latvia, probably, yeah.
So we cover all industrial hemp products, but nevertheless, we do not cover some products such as smokable, vaping, recreational, and neither medical. We only focus on the so-called cannabis sativa L, which is the varieties of cannabis that contains low level of THC, while high level of CBD, but it cannot be said. Basically, we do regulatory advocacy and business development for our members in Brussels, always based on science, transparency, of course, a sustainable model. I will be very brief because I guess that you know that hemp is nothing new, even if it looks like a major new crop that has been invented a couple of years ago, but it's not. Hemp has a long history. It has been used for food, for paper production, for textile, and as well for extract as medicine or as food supplement. It depends how we can look at it. So please. Here are a couple of examples as well how hemp was already in the media, so was a crop that was widely used and displayed a little bit everywhere in Europe during the 20th centuries. When we speak about hemp, let's give some figures. Hemp is a very, very small crop if we compare it to any other crop that today we have in Europe. Nevertheless, what is important to be said is that hemp was big. Hemp was a major crop, not only in Italy or France that we have a couple of figures here, but as well all over Europe. I guess the next slide. Yeah, as you can see, so around the 40s, the hectares in Europe were 400,000 hectares, and then we have a rapid decrease till 10,000 hectares between the 60 and 2000. Now we are experiencing a growing again of hemp. There is a lot of interest from the farmers and from the operators to farm and to process hemp. So this is why we can explain that there is this increasing in the last years, and the trend is still growing. But still, if we compare hemp to any other crop, hemp basically doesn't exist because we are very, very small compared to any other crops. To give you an example, when we communicate the figures to the European Commission, we do not have even a dedicated line to hemp. We fall within the line other crops because hemp is very small. When it comes to the common agricultural policy, this is one of the regulations that we look at because somehow the common agricultural policy regulate as well hemp, especially in the limits to receiving direct payment, which is the limits today is 0.2%, but from the 1st of January 2023 it will be up to 0.3%. What is it interesting to see in these slides is that the fluctuation of the limits of THC. As far as I know, there were no accidents reported to any abuse or any adverse effect coming from the level of THC, but nevertheless, it is still an issue. We can see that in the 80s it was around 0.5%, then go down to 0.3% in 1999. France convinced the European Commission to lower down the level to 0.2%, claiming some health issue without reporting any evidence. And the European Commission and then the European Commission, thanks to A and our member, we advocate to increase the level and to re-establish the level up to 0.3%. And it's good because the member state and the European Parliament trusted us, and now the limits should be again up to 0.3%. Will be on the 1st of February 2023. January 2023. Most of the time we tend to imagine that these limits dedicated to direct payment is the so-called narcotic limits, but it's not. It's only the limit that describe the limits where farmers can get direct payment. If they farm 0.4%, it's not that they are mandatory and narcotic or they can be arrested, but it's simply that for sure Brussels will not send the direct payment to this farmer. It is important to be said because most of the time member states tend to mix up the subject and tend to interpret the maximum level for direct payment as the legal level. But it's not the case if you look at the regulation. We are seeing different levels of THC in Europe, which complicates the things because we have Italy that by a national regulation increase the level up to 0.6%. We have Austria and Luxembourg that they are already planting since 5-10 years up to 0.3% without having access to direct payment, but allowing these farmers to plant. We have Czech Republic and Poland that already now are working to implement higher level up to 1%. As you can imagine, this is not easy for the operators because having different level implies having different limits of compounds in the final product. So we would welcome an homogenized approach towards this level, but then it's the decision up to member states.
Yeah, can
because we divide basically just to explain to the audience. So I'm the managing director. I'm in charge of the upper part of the plant, the leaves, the seeds, and the flowers, while Francesco is supporting the association for the bottom part of the plant. So I guess
and agriculture as well.
This is your part.
We are a very good binomial, so we work very well together. And so on this, what will be the consequences of this increase of THC limits? Well, of course, it means that breeders can have access to, can work on different varieties, there is a better gene pool, and which also we would expect that in coming years there will be more varieties registered on the European catalog, because if you want to grow hemp today, your variety needs to be registered on the European catalog, and not all farmers use registered varieties, but this is another issue. And of course, this would also allow a much flexible approach when there are controls on the field, which means that limits can be much higher. And yeah, so it would be better both for farmers and breeders. So back to Lorenzo again.
All right.
Food. So what is hemp food?
So is it okay like this? Okay. So now we move on again to the upper part of the plants. What we can find in the upper part of the plants, we have the leaves, the flowers, and the seeds. But if you agree with me, if we have seeds, we have no flowering anymore, because flowers turn flowering top, have transformed into a fruiting top. So basically we can have both leaves and seeds. So when it comes to seeds, so this is a picture of seeds. These are hemp seeds. You squeeze them, you get an oil, or you can squeeze them and you get the protein or the flour differently. You just need to monitor the level of THC in the final product. Here we have a picture of the green mass, the biomass, the so-called extraction biomass. We take this biomass, we dry it, we grind it, and then we send it to extraction. And it can be composed, as you can see, is a brownish stuff left from flowering. This is what we tend to collect. So Stefano Amaducci said it correctly. There are still cannabinoids in these parts of the plant, less in the peak moment of the flowering top, but still, as we tend to suggest to go down the triple or at least double use, so the seeds, the leaves, and the stalks. This is a material, a good starting material for the extraction, and that is something that the farmers find on top of the fibers. Hemp food does exist on the market because it is legal, according to member state, while leaves and flowers have not a clear definition yet within the European regulation. What is hemp food is definitely legal because it belongs from the seeds, and the seeds cannot be considered a novel food, neither a narcotic, even if they have traces of both cannabinoids and as well THC, which is the only intoxicated cannabinoids in the hemp plant. Why it's so good, the hemp food and the oil? Because it carries loads of benefits. As you can see, it's a good and sustainable source of protein, containing not only fiber but as well vitamins and mineral. What is interesting in the oil, in the hemp seeds oil, is the equilibrium between the different fatty acid and the different omega. It was the most consumed vegetable oil in Europe for centuries. Now we have olive oil instead. So when we squeeze the oil, we obtain a byproduct. The byproduct is called hemp cake. So it's a material a little bit wet. That is what you get from pressing the oil. And we can still use this material for other purposes. It can be food, can be feed can be feed or can be other products.
So used also as feed, like seeds can be used as feed for example, for fowls, for birds, for yeah, mainly like for chickens, but also for rabbits, for example. And it's a very good source of nutrients. And of course, the whole plant also can be used as forage for livestock. And there are some nice market experiences also in the US. By feeding the chickens with hemp seeds, which enhance also the content of nutrients in the yolks, in the eggs. And there are a lot of studies ongoing on feed and hemp as feed. And we mentioned here the Padua University and the Kansas State, and we expect many more upcoming. And well, of course, always the problem is like the content of THC. What is the limit, and when a feed becomes a feed additive and is no more a feed product.
What we are doing within the association, we have launched a set of toxicological studies. Our scope is to increase the limits of THC in the seeds and in the final products. Now the seeds part is more or less over. If you have question, we can have some discussion here around the seeds. Otherwise, I keep going with the extract. That is. Okay, we keep going. Okay. Okay, perfect. So, as I said before, we can obtain food from hemp coming from the seeds that we have discussed. So the only important point is to monitor the THC level in the final product, but as well it can be derived from the leaves or the flower. And in this case, we are speaking about an hemp extract. In Europe, there is a catalog, which is called the Novel Food Catalog, that can be changed by member state, and it was the case in January 2019. Member states have decided that that leaves, extracts, and flowers should be considered as a novel food. Doesn't matter which is the level of the contamination level of the cannabinoid. So. We do not agree with this reading coming from member states. We still believe that there is a certain product that should be considered as traditional food. Let's do an example. We believe that if a farmer is processing whatever varieties from the catalog that contains 3% or 2% of CBD, and if the same level is found in the final product, we should look at this compound as a traditional food. Traditional food doesn't need any pre-market authorization to be placed on the market. It's only up to the responsibility of the operator to do the things properly. Then where we agree strangely with the European Union institution is that when we enrich or when we isolate the compounds, that it looks like a white powder cannot be a food. I'm not taking a spoon of isolated in the morning. So this is indeed a novel food. What's a novel food? A food that has not been consumed up to a significant degree before 1997. So now it's up to us to prove that hemp was traditional food, and this is what we are doing within the European Union institution. When it comes to novel food, so the leaves and the extract that have been enriched or isolated, then we go under Article 10 of Novel Food Regulation, which is the pre-market authorization, because the big issue of having a novel food is that before you put the novel food on the market, you have to demonstrate that it is safe. So this is why the tox study are needed. Okay, these are the rules that the operators have to match when they are trading their products. Today, there are no maximum level of THC. There is only a guidelines derived from EFSA. We believe that is a very, very restrictive guidelines. We are talking about 1 microgram per kilogram per body weight, and we are talking about an uncertainty factor of 36. I don't know if you are familiar, but you have many residual in your food. You have residue of codeine or other medicine that are left in the food, and therefore we have EFSA that is checking that all these products contain the right value to avoid intoxication in human. And this is the case as well for THC. But while nicotine has an uncertainty factor of 4, THC has an uncertainty factor of 36. So So according to EFSA, codeine is more or less 8 times less dangerous than THC. So we cannot abide to these figures. So this is why we have invested 1.6 million euros in conducting a new toxicological studies on human beings, 400 human beings in a clinic, to see if we are giving more THC, where is the value? Because at the end, the problem of THC is that in contrast with any other contaminant, THC has no NOAEL. NOAEL is the non-observed adverse effect level. We have only LOL, they have derived LOL, a low observed effect level, and the calculation, the starting point of the calculation is the LOL. So as you can imagine, we always will end up with wrong value that we cannot support. So this is what I was saying. Normally, finally, member states have decided to come up with a regulation that will bring a lot of that will at least brings a little bit more homogenization towards the different limits on THC. The adoption is foreseen in the first quarter of 2022. In parallel, we are waiting for a legal review coming from the European Commission around the leaves and the extracts and the flowers, so we will know how these products should be marketed and traded in Europe. And as I said before, we are conducting toxicological studies not only on THC, but as well on CBD to prove the safety of our novel food. From hemp extract, you can do some cosmetics. Cosmetics is a little bit more clear, and it deserves less bureaucracy to be put on the market, or at least we know that member states are much more relaxed towards cosmetics than food. These are examples of cosmetics that we can find on the market in Europe today. You have some rules, what you can put into a cream today. You can put an isolate of CBD, an isolate of CBG, some leaf extracts, and some other compounds.
Now it's back to me. So Professor Amaducci already mentioned a bit about sustainability of hemp plant. So again, why so good and why now we talk more and more about hemp? So I think that the first feature that we should highlight is that it's a multi-purpose crop, already highlighted, so we can make more than one product with the same crop. And it's a we claim it's a carbon negative raw material. It's not so simple because you need to assess the whole life cycle assessment of the product, but still it grows very fast. It yields a lot of biomass, which means that it has a lot of great content in carbon. And why, if we do the calculation on the different components of hemp, so cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin, etc., on a basis of an average yield of hemp, we get to this type of calculation between 9 and 13 tons of CO2 per hectare on average. Of course, I mean, this is only in the field, and we don't take into account how it's processed, etc., etc. And we would very much welcome more studies on that. We will work on that, and we also have the chance to work with a lot of universities around Europe, and we thank them very much, by the way. We'll come back to that later, but we need for sure more studies. Again, it's a nutritious food source, and what is also very interesting from an economic and social point of view, it depends very much on a local community, on a local level, because the first processing needs to be done in a radius that is quite small. And because the seeds, they need to be cleaned and they need to be stored close by. The first processing of the fiber as well needs to be done very close to the farm. Then plenty of literature. We've seen a lot of new studies coming up on hemp sustainability. Just to mention a few interesting things. Well, for sure, if it's used in a sustainable way, so if it's used in rotation with other crops, and not as any other crop on like in conventional agriculture, it can be very helpful for soil. It does not require a lot of inputs, both water and phytopharmaceutical products, and it is a source of pollen in a period of floral scarcity, so it might be good also for bees. And because it has very deep roots and a high turnover of leaves, it brings nutrients to the soil, and it also helps soil erosion. There are also a lot of, for example, there's Rodale Institute in the US that has worked on hemp effects in subsequent crops, and they have discovered, along with other institutes, that there might be a positive effect on the subsequent crop, in particular cereals and soybean. And last but not least, it can be used for phytoremediation, which means growing it on marginal lands to extract contaminants from the soil. Then, of course, I mean, I like to remind that hemp is not sustainable per se. I mean, nothing is sustainable per se. Sustainability is an emerging concept, and we cannot just say, yeah, it's sustainable because it's a lot of carbon, or it's sustainable because it can be good for organic production. We have to take into account also how it interacts with the people, the profit, so the social sustainability and the economic sustainability. And it seems also that taking this into account, we need to, it's not given that it's sustainable, but we need to promote a sustainable approach to hemp. And it's a perfect time because, you all know that we discussed about climate emergency. The European Commission has promoted this famous Green Deal that talks about, in a way, relocalizing and bringing back the production at a lower and local scale to and to reduce the use of inputs, etc., etc. So we really believe that we can, with hemp, we can turn these risks into opportunities, and it's a perfect historical moment from a political point of view. So what is key to achieve this sustainability? It has already been said. Whole plant approach. Let's use the whole thing. Dual, triple crop use. As Lorenzo said, hemp is still a small crop. We need investments in the processing lines, in the decortication facilities. Like in Europe, there are something between 5 and 10 decortication facilities. To our knowledge, for example, in the US, there are almost none. There are no decortication facilities. So basically, and I've heard this, like there were some farmers that were freezing, like putting in freezers their stocks because they didn't want to throw them away or to burn them. So there's a big problem. We need a lot of money to invest, and that is why it's also important to have a value chain approach to work with farmers, processors, and universities or academia to really leverage the positive features of them. A lot of research, I mean, further research is, well, for sure, most welcome. I don't want to say it's needed, but it's always needed. Elementary research, like any type of research, which will bring also to further discoveries. There is much more than the fiber, the seeds, the cannabinoids. There were studies on using the microfibers as graphene alternatives. There is a lot to do on green chemistry because all the phytocompounds of hemp can be used on many different levels. And but a lot still needs to be done. And now I'm talking about like my topic because I work more on fibers and sheaves. Again, as of today, we are still a very small sector. Hemp fiber has been used mostly for the paper making industry for specific applications, and some non-woven, for example, in the automobile industry and insulation. Those markets are growing. There's a huge demand for hemp fiber that cannot be found anywhere in the world. I mean, there are not enough decortication facilities, as I said, but there's a huge appetite for hemp fiber. At the farm levels, the biggest problem was finding the agricultural machineries. Now, solutions are there. They will be marketed from this year, next year, if I'm not wrong. And by the way, one of the prototypes was that will be marketed was conceived also here in partnership with some Belgian universities, and so this at least will be solved. We need to scale up the production then, which means, as I said, decorticators, catching lines, and investments, and so that we can respond to the market by bringing additional quantities on the market. And of course, I'm repeating what Professor Amaducci said about quality. We need grading systems, but just jump on another subject, but just to give an example, we only have 82 varieties of hemp registered in the European catalog. Flax, which is another fiber crop, has 200. And there are like thousands of varieties for cereals and oleaginous crops. So really there is so much we need to do. Again, a few examples of what's already on the market, just to show you that there are big brands like IKEA, H&M, Patagonia, Nike, and Levi's that are bringing back hemp. They're sometimes, we could argue that they use it more like a sort of, I don't want to say that word, but like a good marketing argument, which is very nice, and also helping the sector gaining in consumers' knowledge, gaining consumers' knowledge. Construction material, so textile is not the only output market for fiber. Construction material is also huge in terms of potential, because it's not only that it's sustainable material hemp, it's also very, very, very good insulation material and a very good reinforcement for any type of composites like resins. So basically, instead of using fiberglass, you could use hemp fiber or flax fiber or any type of fiber. And as alternative to plastics, again, I mentioned composites. You basically can do everything. You can already find hemp fiber with flax fiber in the automobile industry, especially in the sports car, so luxurious cars, because it is strong, but it's light. So it can also decrease the amount of energy that you use while driving the car or a train or whatever. There was also this project in France, the SNCF, so the railway company, is working also on natural fiber for some compounds of their TER, not their regional trains. Professor Amaducci mentioned the Sushi project. Next week there will be the final meeting of the project. I should be attending, and they were looking into using the fiber, for example, for making hi-fi, so sound systems, but also the like scooters, like motorcycles. So basically, you could do whatever. It's a high yield in cellulose, so you can also do some cellulose extraction. And I forgot to mention, in the textile section, you can also make viscose out of hemp or lyocell. There was like this hemp lyocell that has been registered in Germany. So a lot of innovation going on. Well, the paper and packaging, as I said, mostly the market is mostly for specialized paper products and a lot for cigarettes paper. But basically, you can do everything. You can do any type of packaging, and if you then put like a coating on, it can become like a food contact material, and it's lightweight, it's recyclable, and it's perfect. So much more than that. So we do believe that the future is hemp. I mean, I would have not changed my job otherwise.
Good to know.
But also because Lorenzo was a managing director, so I was also I made this choice because of that as well. But so I just wanted to add, like, last thing, that we would very much welcome to collaborate with all the research centers around Europe. We already do this. We set up our scientific committee within EIA. It's a sort of informal networking group where we have now almost 40 universities from Europe and beyond. And the idea is like really to create a network of researchers that work with hemp. They have access to our documents, our intranet, and we meet twice per year. We invite them also to our working groups, because we really believe that without university in the academia, we cannot, work on the future of our industry, of hemp or whatever. And yeah, so get in touch with us, join us. Thanks a lot. One question, of course.
If you agree.
Or maybe, yeah.
And
Perfect.
if it's okay for you.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for the big overview that you gave us about hemp. The last presentation of today, it's about a real life experience of having launched the first CBD oil farm in Belgium. Lot of Demorceau will give us an overview about his personal experience managing a company for CBD production, starting from the cultivation of hemp here in Belgium. Now I'm gonna select the presentation. I have to open it first. Yes. Does it work? Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the kind invitation. So, having spoken about the plant a lot and its context, I wanted to give you my story of how we ended up farming hemp. So I studied agriculture at the University, in the University of Edinburgh, and like everyone, I heard about hemp back then, and then later on I did some studies in finance, and then I founded a company called CO2 Logic, which is the leading company in the Benelux on carbon footprinting. So that was 2006, and following that, obviously there was quite a lot of demand for this sort of idea of measuring carbon footprint. So that became something which I integrated into my day-to-day life and everything I did. And so when I decided to step down from carbon footprinting in my day-to-day chore, I went back to farming, which is my roots, which is what I'd studied and which is what I've always loved. And I took on a farm around 2014. But of course, the first thing I did when I got on the farm was to start thinking about carbon footprinting again. So I looked at all the different plants we were growing and what we were doing and how we could improve it. And obviously the hemp plant kept coming back and back and back, as basically there's no other plant which you can grow in the poor soils which I have here in Belgium, which have such a positive impact, not only in terms of carbon, but also in terms of biodiversity, requiring little herbicide and pesticide. So I was pretty convinced already, but then in 2018, I took a break and went on holiday with my two little boys, for whom I have a responsibility to look after the planet. And while on that holiday, I read an article about how Belgium was going to be one of the first countries to legalize the sale of biomass hemp with a governmental tax on it, which is still the case today. And so CBD in that sense had a sort of legal angle to it in Belgium, and the federal government was receiving revenues for this. So then as a farmer, I thought, if I can grow it, and if people in Belgium are allowed to sell it, then surely, there's not much left to get on and make a CBD, but we were going for a CBD oil. So that's how it started, and that's my story for the beginnings, which actually is the easiest part, because it wasn't quite so simple. I found out relatively quickly. Now, just to answer a first question before going to the CBD aspect and the seed, because we're also doing seed, hemp seed oil, it would be like, during the discussion we just heard about all the benefits of the plant and its fiber. And a lot of people, their first question when I say I'm growing hemp in Belgium is, well, why are you not doing the fiber? And if you're doing the fiber, how come the previous experiences in Wallonia haven't worked out? So some of you might know that in 2016 there was a big initiative in Wallonia to grow hemp and to get it back on the sort of cultural circuit. And Hemp and Belchamp were created, and they built a factory for defibering. There's not so many factories being built like this regularly in Europe. So, and as you said earlier, Yasha, you were saying that in America there's none. I think is that what you said? Yeah. So there's none in America. So building one in Belgium is quite a big, it's quite a big step. Sadly, that didn't work out, and that went bankrupt in 2019. This obviously influenced my logic, and actually even before that, in 2007, I think there was a company called Chanvre, which had tried also to get into the business of hemp through defibering and through fiber. So I thought, well, that's a bit risky, of course. When people have tried something, it hasn't worked, then you learn from it. So I thought, well, I still want to get hemp back into the circuit, though. So we thought, we'll look at seed and CBD, and hopefully that will get the hemp plant back into the Belgian rotations. And from there, we can then also look at the fiber. And as the professor said before me, whether it's one, whether it's the biomass or whether it's the fiber, one is a waste of the other, or you could say neither is a waste. They're both plants which can then be valued. So for me, you've got to value the whole plant, otherwise you're not going to be competitive in the long run, because there are already people in Europe valuing the whole plant. So we've got to value as many parts of the plant as we can. Obviously, the genetics, the way you grow it, etc., don't allow you to do that with every part of all the uses which have been mentioned by Yasha. But you can do it on certain different parts. So the idea was to get into something where there's a margin, not too large scale, it doesn't require a huge factory, and so hemp seed oil and CBD oil seemed the most logical way forward. So then, I looked into it. So you can grow hemp in Belgium. That's perfectly legal under 0.2 THC. You've got to use the genetics and do the paperwork. As I said earlier, there is some space for owning biomass and moving it around as long as it's under 0.2. But we wanted to be very clear on this, so we wrote to the Belgian authorities. As you know, Belgium is a very complex country with many authorities at the regional and federal level, and different things. For example, agriculture is not necessarily managed by the same level as THC or hemp would be if it was classified as something which was illegal. So we wanted to make sure that all of these authorities were aware of what was going on in the world, because CBD is being extracted in at least now 3 neighbouring countries to Belgium, totally legally, as an oil. So we wanted to make sure that if we did it in Belgium, that would be possible. So we wrote to them, and that took about 2 years to get a full, proper reply. When you're farming, as you know, you're on annual cycles, so when you've planted a plant in the ground and you're waiting for an answer, that doesn't make your life as a farmer very relaxing or agreeable. Obviously, the plant, as long as it's planted, we could still use it as textile at the end, so we were still open to any use until we harvested it. So we were waiting until the harvest to see what we would be allowed to do. That went on for 2 years. And then when we had the Canavape ruling in 2020, 14th of December or November?
19th of November.
19th of November. That was very big news, for me at least, and it changed completely my zenitude level on the farm, because it clarified that as long as you're growing hemp under 0.2 THC, which will now slowly become 0.3, you are in a totally legal zone. Voila, so I thought that would be the end of it, but actually there's still more complications, and I'm not going to go into them now because we're still in the middle of them, but at least when we're growing the plant on the field, we now know that everything's fine. It gets a bit more complicated when it comes to actually commercializing it, but at least that allows us to try different variants, genetics, and I confirm what the professor said earlier. One climate is not the same as another. First year we planted a variant called Finola, which we had in 2019 was a very sunny year, for those who remember. 2019, 2020 very sunny, and then 2021 was very rainy. So we were very worried that our plant was staying within the rules. So we're testing regularly to make sure that's the case. and we work with the Walloon Centre of Research of Agriculture, Zarattini, to make sure that we stay within the legal zones. So that's reassuring and allows us to get on. As for the rain, well, last year we sowed our crop, and then about a week later we had catastrophic rains, which basically just wiped the whole crop away. So, you know, being a farmer, obviously the climate is something which is a reality, and therefore the genetics does fit into that. The other thing I'd say about the genetics is there's obviously, you know, which genetics to use to get the best seed, the best CBD, the best fiber, but you also have which genetics to use to have a crop at the right date, because as a farmer, you need to have access to machines, you need to have access to transport, you need to have access to, you know, logistical and transformation centers. So if you're bringing in a crop at the wrong date and you can't treat that crop right away, it's probably going to end up in the bin. So these are also things to take into account in the genetics beyond just the which is the best for whatever. You've got to think of these things all up front, of course. You know, which genetics you can use, because we are going to be available at which dates. The Common Agriculture, the declaration, you've got to fill in your pack as well. So there's a lot of things to do up front. Yeah, auto-flowering, non-auto-flowering. So these are things which weren't mentioned so far, but they also influence you. So you get some crops which automatically go into flowering and therefore can produce maybe more seeds, for example, or allow you to have more flexibility on the dates. Others are more dependent on the hours of the day, the hours of sunlight in the day. The 0.2, 0.3 already mentioned, but this will be very useful because we are hoping more genetics will come online for farmers. And just some pictures of, you know, so we roll the soil before planting. Ideally, if we can have a bit of rain after, it's perfect to get the crop going. The birds, which were mentioned earlier, the children climbing on the tractor and getting in the way. There's all sorts of fun things going on which are linked to farming hemp. And I think also what's quite fun about farming hemp is there's a lot of enthusiasm. People who come and visit the farm, you know, they know that this is a very ecologically sound plant. It's participating massively to a revolution that hopefully will happen in agriculture. And so that's a lot of fun. You know, I've had people drive 4 or 5 hours to come and see our hemp production in Belgium, so it's very satisfying. Obviously, I'm farming other crops as well, so this is going into a rotation of crops. I haven't mentioned that I'm a farmer initially before planting hemp, and that's important because you can't just go and plant hemp and then what do you do the next year? Plant hemp again and again. Hemp's got to go into a rotation. So, and this is outdoor hemp farming I'm talking about, of course. So that's important as well as you think about these things as well in your farm, is how you're going to fit it into rotation and what it brings to your next plant. And that was mentioned in the previous slide. It's very positive on the next plant because it's tête de rotation, we say in Wallonia. It's different from your wheat and your barley. It changes, so it allows better control of your pathogens and things like this. Grows very fast. That's really impressive. I mean, I tried to sort of watch it for an hour and see if I can actually see it grow. I haven't managed to actually concentrate the whole way through, so I'm not quite there, but I think you can nearly see it grow in the middle of the summer. Infrastructure here, I just wanted to put an example, but I mean, yeah, moving this all around, transporting it, conditioning and everything requires quite heavy infrastructure, so that we were lucky to already have that initially. And yeah, that's the idea, is to get it to a CBD oil in the end. Voila, I think I've covered most of the things that concern us farmers in the CBD world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. So I think we have 15 minutes to have some questions. Yes, set.
Before you sit down, can you go back through your implements there? I've never seen that. It looks like you're pushing a disc through the field in the front of your tractor. You got a 3-point hitch on the front.
Yeah.
You can push a disc to the front like
Yeah, it's not. That's not specific to hemp though.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah, it breaks the. It breaks. We got really poor land, so it breaks the boulders.
Can you go back one more slide and just walk me through your whole, because it looks like you have implements on the front and the back. So you got a disc, you've got some type of roller, then you got a rototiller.
So we roll it. We plant about 2 centimeters depth, and then when on that tractor you can't see the back, but basically the back is the other part. So you've got that on the front, which is breaking up the soil, and you're sowing it right behind.
Okay, but I mean, so the front is that a disc with a cultipacker behind it?
I swear I don't know what a cultipacker is, but it's a disc and it's teeth scratching the ground.
Okay, and then that's a rototiller on the back?
And that's for sowing, and we'll have a sort of discs as well at the back.
And then a drill.
And then the drill behind, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, a bit heavy maybe, that's the only negative, of course.
But one pass.
Well, no, we've got another tractor preparing the soil just in front, which has been prepared a couple of months, well, a month or two before that's already been prepared once, and then we'll re-prepare it and then sow straight in. Roll it and then sow straight in.
Thank you for your explanation.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. It was a very nice talk. I was just wondering, do you need the subsidies in order to be profitable to grow hemp? Question for you.
Yeah.
Question for you, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling into the cup.
I can't really answer that today because we haven't, we're still testing the commercial aspect of it. So it's difficult to answer. Obviously, if you want to get a crop going in a country, if you look at the new Green Deal of the Common Agricultural Policy, I mean, everything points towards hemp. I mean, lower pesticides, lower herbicides, less inputs, and then they're also asking for longer rotations and things like this. So hemp, which is not really in Belgium, it's basically, it's in the other category as well. It's very small, not very used. So if you want to get it going, if you want to get towards the Green Deal, etc. objectives, then you've got to give it subsidies.
Yeah, I understand.
Can I try to reply to this question? I would simply say that if member states stop arguing around the micro level of THC, or if the member state will finally give a clear definition of what is an extract, what we can do up to which level, if there will be another sector for the bottom part of the plant, I guess hemp does not need this common agricultural policy support. But we need the clarification on the final products.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's worrying if you don't sell it and you're in trouble, of course. I was also wondering, is there like a cooperation of farmers in Belgium that are more people that are farming more of hemp? So you can join forces, learn from each other, and try to see how here in Belgium you can grow them profitably.
So for the fibre, there's Valbion, which is a hemp association in Wallonia. Not sure if there's anything in Flanders for this. But for CBD, as I said, I mean, in 2019, when we wrote to the authorities, no one had even basically heard of it. And from some of the answers I got, I understood very clearly that in one of the answers I got, I even got that seeds were not legal. So, I mean, seeds, farming hemp seeds were not legal. So, that's not easy when you get that. It's like, what do you do? These things need to be clarified. So I think there's definitely room for things to happen. It's early days, but there's definitely room for movement now. I think with 0.3 THC, that will help as well.
And is it possible to harvest both the seeds and fibers? Is that what you do at the moment?
It's possible to harvest the biomass and the fiber, and I believe it's possible to do the seed and the fiber as well, yes.
Okay. Yeah, but those our members that work with fiber, especially coarse and short fiber, so fibers that gets decorticated, not scotched, so not flax-like fiber, but like really like coarse hemp fiber. Yes, so you can get the seeds, the fiber. Of course, you will not use it to produce very fine textiles. You will more use it for insulation purposes, or you use the fiber in the sheets for making construction products. And then the seeds, and you can also have some residual biomass. That again, you would also use it suitable for also for feed purposes, because also the feed market it's a huge market, and the residual biomass could also be used in feed. But then we have the other regulatory problem with that.
And maybe the last question, because you mentioned, I think you mentioned it, that it's also used for phytoremediation. So I was wondering, what is the purpose there? So I think
With what?
Phytoremediation.
Phytoremediation. Phytoremediation. Yeah. So, well, it seems it's a very good crop for extracting heavy metals from the soil. There was even like a research.
Are you sure about that?
There was the UCL working on that. I know for sure. They did a seminar like a few months ago last year, and there are some comparative studies also with other crops.
It's not really a very well-known metal tolerant species or something. And I think you also have to be cautious, because if you would like to use it for other purposes, you really don't have to have this.
We agree, of course.
I would be very cautious in saying it's good for phytoremediation, because it may end up in the wrong box.
Yeah, but we have to distinguish between like using hemp for only phytoremediation and growing hemp in polluted soil for making something out of it. So for me, there are two separate issues.
Yeah, but be very cautious, because one of the reasons why people are cautious about phytoremediation and using food crops for that is because you need a very separate system to make sure that those streams are not getting mixed.
Yeah. And
that relies on people being very honest, which can cause trouble.
I don't know. For me, it's just like it's an evidence that no one would use a phytoremediation crop for producing food. But even fiber, I mean, but
there's so many cases where people are selling things which are not turned out not to be the ones what they say it is, and then end up in the food chain. You don't want to be there.
No, of course. I mean, you don't want to produce soil for making seeds, yeah.
But I guess there are as well some regulation that protects European consumers. That is the most regulated food. Look at the contaminants regulation. So if the contamination could cause an adverse effect, these are stopped by the RASP alert. That is a system that is working quite well since 20 years in Europe. So we can be protected by other regulation to avoid, indeed, you're right, it could happen, so it could be a disaster in this case.
There was a question online.
David? Go. You want to make a question, David?
Sorry for this. Thanks for the nice talks and so on. I also share the same fear that Mark had about this using or repurposing something like this, like phytoremediation, instead in case if you use it as a tool. So usually the consumers need to be educated. So I won't really trust much on the level of confidence.
But you know that.
So it's like, I mean, it's most like an advance. And,
yeah.
Yes.
I believe that we do have the most regulated alert from safety food in Europe. So I don't know why we should end up in the wrong category. So And then again, we have to test the final product before putting onto the market. So we have to test the different levels, different limits. Among them, in our case, we have THC, heavy metals, and all the residuals. So if these limits are high, this cannot be suitable for food.
This might be like a boomerang, like a damaging image that you're using something that to clean, then you give. I mean, just like a sort of paranoia consumers.
But no one trust me, no one selling hemp has like a plant that is cleaning soils. And, no. But the good point. I agree with you.
I've actually got a question, more like on the technical growing. What are the means of continuous check of the level of THC once the plant has been considered safe and toxic because of the limits? Is it connected to the environmental stress that might lead to an increased amount of production?
There is a peak of
yeah, I mean, this is a very good question. There is a control system in the EU. Basically, the member states need to check once per year in a very specific period during the floraison, so the flowering period of hemp, the content in THC. So when it's the peak, so basically, the idea is to check the THC level at the flowering point. But then, yeah, good question. Well, why? If it's from safe variety, why do you need to check? Well, first of all, the purpose also to avoid that there are farmers that grow other varieties than those who are registered in the catalog, which is sometimes the case. We observed that some farmers in Europe can also use non-authorized varieties and kind of, yeah, and they trick a bit the law by using the certificates of other registered varieties. So this is a problem. So you still need to have controls. And yeah, so basically that's the reason why there are controls.
There are other examples, the case of Canada, they do not control anything. They control that the seeds that you bought is below the threshold, what you said, and then you are okay for the rest of your life. We are in Europe, we have the most concerned safety. So this is why we have to perform a multiples check on the field.
And also, I mean, Canada, recreational cannabis is legalized, so it's different.
Course,
so they have a
different
different perception.
But just to make you understand, they test only the starting material, meaning the seeds, and the rest doesn't need to be checked and rechecked like we do in Europe.
Thanks for the clarification. Then a third question is like, what about your concern about new labor versus tradition? What would be the drawback?
But first of all, we do not agree. First of all, we do not agree. We do not agree with this principle that we should put a label of a novel to a food that has been consumed 2 centuries. So I have an issue with that because I have proof and I have evidence. This is why we are invoking Article 4 to show that it has been consumed, for me, to a significant degree, widely in Europe. So as a matter of fact, I do not agree. I should not comply with some rules if our operators do not feel that they enter into this category, point one. Point two is, you know, novel food has been used for cultivated meat. So you take a cell of a cow, you put into a laboratory, and then you can obtain a food. This is novel. This is the right category. So they want to force us to stay in the same category of cultural meat, and we cannot agree. Then it comes the problem of the money. When you market, when you trade a novel food, you need a novel food authorization, which is quite costly. Our novel food authorization costed us nearly 4 million euro. 4 million euro, I don't know how many operators, especially small, medium enterprise, can afford these costs. So we joined forces and we have fulfilled the request from our members to conduct on their behalf a novel food application.
125.
And to, let's say, launch this category, like, for you it's important to prove that the food was consumed very long ago, like with the historical, let's say, data sets, or what are the point of, let's say, the use of
you have to prove that the food has been used widely
as food in Europe before 1997. You have proof, you can go to a member state and see, dear member state, please check my proof and get back to me with an answer in 4 months. And this is what we will do.
I think it's quite, I mean, it's quite clear for hemp, right? You have hemp pasta in Italy to produce cheese.
For me and Francesco and Tanguy, yes, we have evidence. Then when we speak with the Ministry of Slovakia, they have a different opinion, for instance. So now it will be the time to assess our proof once for all. And then we know if we are novel, if we are all novel, if only a part is novel, and the rest can be considered traditional food. But I guess that, as I said before, and I agree with the authorities, that an isolated CBD, 99% of purity, which looks like a white powder, is not a food. It's something different. It's something highly processed that was not consumed before. While an extract, we got plenty of proof coming from Italy, where the history of food probably is more important than in others. We have clearly example of extraction using flour, cooking with flowers, putting the flowers of hemp into the pork belly, which is fat extraction because cannabinoids are not water soluble but fat soluble. We have examples. Depends with how much independent you are when you look at this evidence, and which is your will of going through the evidence and assess the evidence in a scientific way.
I think you should ask Fritz, the other coordinator of the BrIAS, because he's studying all those historical
cool.
Food consumption. Just last night.
Hello, thank you. Just more of a comment, bridging on that point is that if you are looking for long-term, really long-term consumption of hemp in Europe, I would recommend looking at archaeobotanical literature. There's vegetation history and archaeobotany. Maybe it's not a very common source, but it's the study of ancient plants on archaeological sites, and there's a lot of evidence from around Europe, but also around the world, also in China, for very long-term use of hemp. The different. Sometimes we have also evidence for using in other products as well, rope, for example, and there are fiber studies on this that have, they're dated, they're quite old, so with an FCM, they've identified, yes, this is effective. So I encourage you, if you are interested in this literature, it does exist, it's out there. Sometimes it's not as easy to find if you don't know where to look, but it's out there. So vegetation history and archaeobotany is one of these journals. So
with great pleasure. I mean, this is what we have found. We have found more or less 40 recipes, because the recipe has to suit our case as well. So cannot be medicine, cannot be raw, because I'm not ingesting a raw. So it has to be specified around food and around this compound. So with great pleasure.
Forages as well, there are some ancient recipes, and I can't speak for Fritz because he's the Roman historian and he would know if there are some Roman recipes, but I know for medieval cookbooks you will also find recipes of types of forages and soups with the seeds.
Let's stay in touch, because we even have a budget to allocate for this research.
Thank you very much for your wonderful talks.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a bit off topic now, sorry. I was just curious because you said that you have to pay for the register food and the novel food, so is it possible that it's it's done to limit a crop which could be competitive, or it's really just because people are concerned about the safety?
People are not concerned. This is my problem, because there are many reports, like there was a report launch in Holland, 67% of the consumers know what is CBDs and are ready to buy CBD even if it's legal. So consumers have no issue. The industry has the product. The concerns come from member states. They don't know how to manage. The CBD is everywhere, and they are afraid, and they have to find a way to manage. And by putting the novel food decision on the table, implicitly some operators, the small one, the one that are starting, are left out. And if you leave out operators, you decrease the number of products on the market that you can monitor and check. But it's a matter of time, because we know that technology and innovation goes faster than regulatory.
I can ask something, but
this is continuation of, for example, in Malta itself, the legalized completely without any issue, right? Like, so how it will affect, like, because Germany and Switzerland also in the next round to completely legalize with respect to hemp and cannabis. So, do you think it will affect somehow, or just?
Well, certainly we can imagine that a full legalization of high contents of THC will have an impact on the plants containing very low THC, meaning industrial hemp, so it will be beneficial, globally speaking. When? I don't know. Legalization in general will come for me, even if it's not, we are not following this battle. And it will normalize the approach towards the bad word, which is cannabis, because unfortunately we are part of the same botanical family, which is Cannabis sativa, and then there are different species, but they don't get it. So
it's just a minor difference, but you also need a special license just to grow hemp.
Of course, yeah. Of course, no. That depends on the country, but most of the country tends to request. Why? Especially because if you do extraction, by definition, when you extract, you end up with a concentration of compounds. Among others, we have THC. So for a moment, the farmer became a narcotic dealer. So to cover this concentration, then he needs to apply for a narcotic license. But it's not homogeneous, again, around Europe. It's up to member states to decide, but this is even more complicated, no? For an internal market for hemp. But yes, because of the concentration of the peak of THC, they have to hold a narcotic license in most of the European countries.
So I'm sorry for my American centricism here. So that's sort of the area I know. But in the US, it's a chicken and egg problem. You mentioned the mills, right, to process the fiber. And if there's not enough mills to process the fiber, then not enough people grow the crop. And if not enough people grow the crop, they can't justify putting in the mills, right? It's sort of chicken and egg. And what we're seeing in cotton, the other fiber crop, is that most of the cotton production is moving out of the southern US to India and China because the mills to weave it have gone there. Right, so what's the plan for the infrastructure to break this chicken and egg scenario in Europe?
Good question. I mean, what we try to do is to bring together all the actors that we need to build that value chain, which means investors, brands. I was this morning talking with a very big clothing company in Europe, and they're interested in developing hemp, but yeah, I mean, we need to bring investment somehow, but they will come because the natural fiber markets is shifting towards natural fiber, and even like cotton in the US sometimes is not as profitable as before. And cotton producers from Texas, they are looking in converting to hemp. Well, I guess at some point they will realize that they need to put a few $1 million to buy the cultivation facility. They do a cooperative. It was mentioned before, cooperative. I mean, cooperation for me is like key. It's the economic model that you use when you build up a value chain in the agricultural sector is very important. And for me, cooperatives are a very good tool for sharing the risks, sharing the costs, and how to solve the problem. Yeah, I mean, we need to discuss and we need to sit at the table together, and those who have the money, they should put the money because it's also in their interest. So the big brands at some point they will need to, I mean, the transition towards bio-based economy will not come like this. And so I, as a citizen, expect that groups like H&M, IKEA, they invest in this conversion.
But as well, certainly if we normalize the upper part of the plants, we give clear definition, we provide clear figures, this will certainly be beneficial for the bottom part of the plant as well. But today farmers are not so keen to farm hemp because it's complicated, because they're not sure if they can sell in oil, they're not sure if the limits goes beyond what they will do with the liters of oil. And extract, let's don't speak even about the extract.
Thank you all very much. The time is a bit over. We have just last question from Tim, because we have to give some space to Tim. And the question is for Francesco. How many new varieties will enter into the new catalog with the THC limit on 0.3%?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Like in the past year, there were almost like 4 or 5 new varieties registered in the new catalog. It depends on breeders. We see that there are also some American or Canadians that are coming with their varieties to Europe to register them. I think it's a good sign. I don't know what will happen. I don't know. We will see. But it's also very. There are difficulties also when it comes to registration of new varieties, because today hemp is considered by those authorities that register varieties as a fiber or oleaginous crop. So those who want to register varieties for extraction, they have a hard time. So because they have to prove that it's not only good for hemp, it's good for seed production or for fiber production. But they will come, I hope.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all the speakers, the attendees today, BrIAS for giving us the opportunity to organize this event, and see you soon. From team, no. Some other question, I think we have to leave because